And so the Chancellor has announced an increase in the threshold for stamp duty, both for first-time buyers and for home movers. I would argue that this is little more than a token gesture, and in the end it will have little or no effect, possibly even the opposite effect. Many of you who bought through the stamp duty holiday, where there was a saving of a maximum of £15,000, will probably have found that you ended up paying significantly more than that in mini property bubbles, that you are now sitting there waiting for the market to correct itself, and you will inevitably or more than likely end up out of pocket. But what are the figures and how do they actually work? Well, the threshold for first-time buyers has been raised from 300,000 to 425,000, with that reduction applying up to a property of 625,000. So basically, first-time buyers will not pay stamp duty on a property up to 425,000. They'll be exempt. They will pay stamp duty between 425 and 625, but on properties over 625 they don't get any benefit. And for everyone else, the threshold has been increased from 125 to 250 before they start paying tax. That 125 to 250 currently, or up to now, was at 2%, and then beyond 250 was 5%, which is quite a lot. So how much is that in pounds and pence? Well, on a £500,000 property for a first-time buyer, the stamp duty has been reduced from 10,000 to 3,750. That's it. I'm sure you can appreciate that that will easily be swallowed up by greedy developers upping their prices anyway. And for home movers, everybody else, on a £500,000 house, the stamp duty payable has been reduced from 15,000 to 12,500, 2,500 saving, which again I doubt will end up being a saving. So what has gone wrong with the housing market? So if we go back before the AST was introduced in 1988, let's go back to 1980 when the right to buy was introduced. There are opinions for and against. This is not a political matter. We're just talking about what actually happened. Now, at that time, it was announced that people renting properties from local authorities were entitled to buy their property and get a discount of up to 50% on that property. That sounds wonderful. The idea was that the local authorities used the money from the sales to build more properties that they could rent out to people who in future could buy more properties. But this policy was implemented so badly, in the end, all local authorities did was use that money to plug the gap in their finances, because this was in middle of one of the worst recessions ever. There was cutback after cutback after cutback. So realistically, we were sold this illusion of entitlement for people to own their own home, but really rental housing stock was sold off to plug the gap in public finances, causing the stock available for rent by local authorities to just plummet, resulting in the 1988 Housing Act, where they introduced the assured short hold tenancy and the loved or loathed Section 21. Now, during the right to buy, people were taking advantage of it. One method that I'm fully aware of, that I know of people who have done this, was a couple with say 3 children would declare that they are separated but that they have joint custody of the children. That would entitle both of them to a 3-bedroom house. So 5 years later they buy both of them. Lenders at the time were happy to offer mortgages, if for those of you who remember, of up to 150%. And bear in mind, they were offering these mortgages of 150% to people who had possibly never had a mortgage before, never borrowed large sums before, people who maybe were inexperienced or unaware how dangerous it is to owe large amounts of money. And then what happened is we had Black Wednesday a couple of years later, high interest rates, people's mortgage rates went through the roof, and many of these people were literally walking into their lenders and handing the keys back and walking away from their houses, which were then bought up by those who had money at the time when everybody else was broke and out of work, and they were buying up all of this housing stock, and the problem was exacerbated over the next few years. So let's take another argument. It could be seen as immoral that those with access to funds can freely compete with those in need of a home. Yet in the UK there are thousands of derelict homes. There are 80,000 homes empty in the UK just in Band A. Over 60% of buy-to-let homes are below par. Their energy performance levels are at the minimum, which is now an E. Many of them are below the minimum and being taken out of the rental market because the landlords can't afford to improve them. Quite a few are still being rented illegally. A property that has an EPC of an E or an F can use twice as much energy as a property that's a B or a C. So these poor tenants are not only paying increasing or ever increasing rentals, but their energy costs are double, and that's before the fact that over the last year the price of energy has almost doubled, even after the £2,500 cap. Now, we have just about the oldest housing stock in the world, which is a credit to our property, but many of these properties are urgently in need of renovation, improvement, and most importantly, of insulation, especially now. Perhaps we should change our mindset that these are not properties and not just our possessions, but that more we're custodians of these properties. They were here before us, and hopefully they will still remain when we are gone. So what can be done? I don't think we should wage war on landlords and investors, but I do feel that the government should offer incentives for landlords and investors not to compete with first-time buyers and therefore reduce the properties that are available to them, but there should be tax and even legal incentives to encourage landlords and investors to buy derelict homes and renovate them and improve their energy performance with tax breaks, perhaps directly linked to how much they have improved them, so that over time our housing stock is improved and properties, hundreds of thousands of properties that are now not available, are made available to rent and buy. And perhaps there could also be an incentive where, with regards to capital gains tax, should these developers, or to encourage these developers to then offer these properties for sale to the tenants. I feel that these properties should be exempt from stamp duty, although most of them will fall below the threshold. And I also believe that rather than a help to buy scheme, which can often serve only to increase the price of property, that the government should offer some sort of statutory mortgage guarantee so that first-time buyers need only come up with a 5% deposit, but that more mortgages are open to them. It seems very unfair that those who are most in need, those who can afford higher interest rates the least, are often the ones who pay the most. This is for a home. This is not for an investment. This is not a business. This is the everyday need for people to buy a home. And this situation needs to be addressed, because if this crisis is not dealt with a fundamental change in the structure of our housing policy, it will only get worse. In principle, the idea of local authorities building properties, renting them out at a reasonable rent, and then giving the tenants the option to buy those properties at a discount after 5 years is great, provided that there are firm rules to ensure that those properties are replaced with more properties. Once again, the government could use tax incentives to encourage investors to finance the building of those homes. But people must have access to a home, and we must ensure that there is a direct route for them to purchase that home. I do also feel that one fundamental error with the right to buy back in the 80s was lenders offering the buyers 150% mortgages. They knew that these people would struggle with that debt. I feel that there should be measures in place, perhaps to protect people from themselves, at least for the initial period, to do whatever we can so that people don't actually lose their homes. Everybody has the right, or should have the right, to a home. Everybody should have a right to buy their home, and people should not be penalised. And as I said, I strongly believe that if there is no significant restructuring in the way we deal with property in this country, that the future will be very, very, very bleak. And this national attitude of pulling the ladder up that has gripped the entire country like an infernal snake over the last few decades needs to be addressed, because it is damaging, and in the end our society is falling apart because people are unable to live, because all of their money is going on rent and they just literally cannot get ahead. And if we think that most people, before they even think about rent or think about a mortgage, so many of them already have perhaps over £50,000 in debt for a degree that they thought would give them a wonderful career, and it doesn't always pan out that way, then I believe that there is a strong case for people to petition for drastic changes, because I feel that they have never been in more need than they are now. I have written an article about this with my thoughts. It's on my blog. I'll post the link in the comments. I'm happy to hear your thoughts on this. This is not a political opinion. I'm just basing my thoughts on what I'm seeing, and once again, a token gesture reduction in stamp duty is going to do nothing to help the thousands or hundreds of thousands of people who just cannot buy their first home. I'd love to hear your thoughts, and I will see you in the next video.